a yard.
Right.
That's the fabric. The batting is, I buy it in 10-yard bundles for, well, if I pay full price, which I try not to.
Yes.
Joanne often will have a 50% off coupon, and that's when I shop for my batting because then I get it for instead of for $40, I can get it for $20.
Yes.
But it runs about $4 a yard. So if you're going for just the actual pricing, about $4 for the batting.
Yeah.
And then there's about a skein of embroidery floss for the tying, which is, I don't know what they are now.
Yeah.
I just buy them by the bundle, so I never know what an individual one is.
Right.
But they're probably, 50, 60 cents these days. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's not the material. I mean, my time, you can't put a price on it because, it just doesn't work. I mean, when I used to do commission quilts when I had more time.
Yeah.
People would ask me to do a wall hanging for their family or something like that. And those were more artistic and very much handwork and all that.
Uh-huh.
But trying to charge for them was so difficult because people think, oh, well, it's just a bit of fabric.
Right.
And I cataloged one time the hours I spent, and I think it was over 300 hours.
Wow.
That I spent on one of the quilts.
Yeah.
Well, it was heavily appliqued and heavily quilted, and the design time alone took me a very long time. So, it really is very hard. I mean, we basically work for chicken feed if we're trying to sell our work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
I mean, I bought Amish quilts when we've been in Pennsylvania, and when I paid for my first one, it was $350 for a queen size quilt, and it was completely hand quilted. And I look back on that and I think, did they make anything on that?
Right.
Really?
Right.
And I know they're a great deal. That was more than 20 years ago. So I'm sure I can't afford one now, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. But you see why. I mean, it's just, it's
I think I had calculated one time that to sell and get anything for the baby quilts, I would have to ask $75 for one, and nobody would pay that.
Yeah.
But just wouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're not going to, that's so interesting. So why do you make the quilts for the babies? That's a lot of work.
Well,
and that's a lot of economic. There's a lot.
It is.
That's a lot.
It is a lot of work, but it's my therapy. Mm-hmm. It sees me through, some tough times. I most particularly enjoy it when I have let go of a baby and they're gone from my home, mm-hmm. and then I can go to the sewing room and play with fabric, and it is just total joy to do it. And part of the joy is knowing that it's going to go somewhere to help somebody else.
Yeah, that's really.
So that's why I do those.
That's really interesting. Where do you buy fabric?
I try to use mostly quilt shops. I know that the private quilt shops struggle in our economy.
Yeah.
And so when it's, part of my travel, we do a lot of travel too. And part of our traveling includes stopping at quilt shops across America.
Oh, cool.
And in fact, in 2012, we took a 2.5-month trip all the way to the Eastern Seaboard and back again. And I visited 69 quilt shops.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. All right.
And I bought a fat quarter in each one.
Oh, that was my question: is did you have a budget? How did you do that? So did you limit yourself to a fat quarter, or
I just don't, worry about the money. That sounds terrible, but I mean, we're retired and we have a pretty decent retirement income, and you know?
Yeah.
So I was able to do it. Plus, at the time, my son and his wife and my daughter had a website that they were working on for quilters.
Oh.
And it was called threadbias.com.
Uh-huh.
And so as I journeyed across the United States, I took cards that told about thread bias and asked in each shop if I could leave some cards there, and did that. And then I bought, like I said, a fat quarter. And as I went across the country, I cut those into blocks and hand pieced in the car.
Oh, how cool.
Block
really, yeah.
with a white. They had a white. They were 3 bars, and the center bar was white. And then I could write on that the town I bought it in and the date I bought it.
That's so cool.
So
I would love to see that quilt. Did you take photos of it? That's
and
amazing.
Now I have a quilt. I have a quilt. Yeah.
I love it.
I did a quilt that I actually hand quilted over the next, couple of years.
Yeah. That
is the reflection of my trip.
That's awesome. That's so clever and so meaningful. Were they different when you chose the fat quarter? Were you looking for a particular theme, or is it like all kinds of? Is it more scrappy?
It's very, very scrappy, and although I didn't start out that way, as I moved across the United States, I began to work toward finding a fabric that might reflect something of the state I was buying it in.
Interesting.
For instance, in Louisiana, I have family in Baton Rouge, and I got a fleur-de-lis in LSU colors.
Oh, that's great.
So, it reflected Louisiana. Arkansas, we saw this rock formations along the side of the road, and one of the places I stopped there, they had some fabric that looked like those rock formations. So that's what I got for Arkansas. Minnesota, I got loons in a lake. So, I tried to kind of incorporate some of the things that were about the state, if I could.
That's really cool. That's awesome. It sounds like an amazing trip.
Oh, it was. It was. We got to see places we'd never been to. I'd never been to New England, and so some of those fabrics are sailboats, of course, and I think there's blueberries for Maine. But yeah, I tried to work out so that there was some kind of connection there.
Very cool. Thread by Us. What happened to Thread by Us, and what was it exactly?
Thread bias was, I don't know if you're familiar with, now I can't think of the name of it. It's for knitting. It's a website for knitters. And off the top of my head, I can't remember what it's called. But my son and his wife had seen that, and they kind of wanted to do something similar for quilters. And so they got it started with the idea they would get advertisers and so on. And they ran it at their own expense for, I think, 3 years, maybe 3.5 years. With them all involved, they went to the Houston Quilt Show. They went to a big quilt show in Utah. They would have a table, but it was all at their own expense. And
that's hard.
They had quite a few people joined, but not the million that you need to really turn it around. So unfortunately, they had to shut it down. But anyway, it was in its kind of its heyday where we were trying to get the word out about it while we were taking that trip. So
and was it,
I did my part.
That's very nice. And I'm trying to let's see if it comes up. Was it patterns? Like, what exactly was it doing?
It was there were some patterns, but it was primarily for people to connect.
Got it.
You join Thread Bias, and then you connect with other quilters, and you can show your work. You know, there were a way to display your stuff. And in fact, several of the things that I've made, I got from people who had something shown on the website. And then I thought, oh, I like that one. And then I could contact them and say, hey, is there a pattern for that? You know, give me a size or whatever. And then I could make my version of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, the yarn place is called Ravelry.
Ravelry, yeah. I know Ravelry.
Yeah. And so they were going for something similar for quilters. But it started out having a small fee to join. And then the goal was, of course, to get enough advertisers to keep it up and running without having to charge too much.
Right.
But it ended up with a lot of people being fairly negative. You know, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Not realizing that it was all being done at their expense.
Right.
You know, that my son was backing it with his own finances. So anyway, it was nice while it lasted, and I thought it was a great idea. But, you know, you just never know. When you put together a website, you're never sure what's going to happen.
It's so true. It's really true. I'm looking at it. It's at, do you know the Wayback Machine at Internet Archive? You can go. And,
oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you can go. I'm looking at it now. It looks like they really were trying hard to sort of have a community that would.
Yeah.
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 Interesting.
Yeah. And those people that are featured there is my son and his wife, and then my daughter, who also quilts beautifully. Yeah, she kind of, although currently she doesn't. She has 4 children, the youngest of which is 1, so she doesn't have time to. Doesn't have time to quilt right now.
No, but that happens. Mine is now a teenager, so I have much more time. It's weird.
I know.
They don't care anymore. It's very strange.
No.
So
I know.
It's adorable.
Well,
and weird.
I raised 6 children, and when my oldest daughter was a baby or a toddler, I made everything she wore. And so kids or no kids, I spent a heck of a lot of time sewing and also quilting, but mostly making her clothes.
Interesting. Well, I think I should get some parenting tips from you. 6 is a lot. We have 1 and we struggle. It feels like you get like what you get the first, you understand like, okay, I can do 7, and then they turn 8 and it's totally different. You're like, okay, well, I don't know how to do 8 now. So I don't know. I feel
it's all so far in the past now. I just think, well, I just got through it, and
it's so true.
And I was fortunate. I did not work outside the home. I was able to be at home with my kids, and I think that makes a huge difference. My daughter has 4, but she also works part-time, so she is gone chunks of time, and has to deal with things like daycare and stuff such that I didn't. So her time is not as flexible as mine was.
Yeah. All right, so I want to ask you a couple more questions before we go. So so I want to talk a little bit. First of all, is there anything else that you would like to talk about your quilting life that we may not have touched upon yet, like aspects? Because we've done, is there anything else that you think is important to chat about?
I don't know. I mean, it's just, it's so much a part of my life that, it just, well, in fact, my email address is jmpquilt@aol.com. So obviously it's a part of my life.
Totally.
And I've just been doing it for so long, and it kind of has evolved into different things at different times. And that's been kind of a wonderful aspect of it, because it's adaptable to where I am in my life.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? That struck me as you were talking,